I'm back with another video today. We'll cover some tips on designing bushes and trees. To start, draw a slightly bulbous semicircle. For our first bush, we'll use this line type. Consider the light source on the right. Shading and volume will be on the bottom left. I'll draw most lines there, fading towards the light. Fewer lines where more light hits. This creates shadow and volume naturally. As you can see, light comes from the top right. It hits the bush we've drawn. Lines are lighter and thinner near the light. They get denser towards the left side. As you see, the shadow increases here. Will increase line density in this area. As you design, also determine the volume and color work where you will add light and where it will be dark. This is key. Where light hits the surface, the completely white parts in the image, we add scattered lines, less dense than on the left side. Similarly, draw scattered lines for the second bush, using short and long lines, about 1 inch long, evenly spaced between 1/2 inch to 2 inches apart. You ultimately complete these lines using more lines where there will be more leaves and fewer lines where light hits the surface. This form is just like the first bush we drew. Determine your light source, where light and shadow hit, with more lines where there is more volume. The closer you get to where the light source is shining, the more dispersed these lines become. And note that lines above the surface for the upper part should go upwards, while lines going downward are for the underside where the bush rests on the ground. Follow these tips and you can easily draw a beautiful minimal bush. As mentioned, where the light hits, the lines are less dense and more dispersed, just to show the form. This is the second bush that we were meant to work on and draw together. For the third plant, we'll use real leaf shapes. Remember, these leaves are smaller. Consider their spread in the image where they're more or less dense. This makes the cartoon look more natural and appealing. As you can see in the video, I'm drawing some leaves as an example. These leaves should point downwards where the plant meets the ground. Start where you think it's shadiest. Increase leaf density there and add more leaves as you move up the plant. As their density decreases and their size becomes smaller, it helps you create a more natural looking bush. Another key point to consider is that you don't work the entire bush with a uniform series of leaves. Rather, you need to define several focal points, and these leaves should be grouped around different centers as shown in the video. I began by working from the left side and continued to a certain spot. I then considered another center for that leaf, and as it extends to the left side, the leaves get smaller towards the right, towards your light source. The leaves on the right have a much lower density, and we stop pulling more leaves on that side. This approach ensures your bush looks more natural and aesthetically pleasing, avoids design problems, and you won't have issues when coloring. As you observe in the video, be mindful to arrange the leaves around the edges of that section of the bush to point upwards, and as you work your way downwards, you can draw the leaves downwards. Now, to make it easier for you to draw the shape of these leaves and explain it more clearly, I will break it down and explain each leaf separately. Consider a center point and draw 3 leaves around it. Due to the effect of gravity, these leaves should curve downwards, so don't draw them like an equilateral triangle. If you tilt the leaves slightly downward and give them a curved shape, it will definitely look more like a bush or a tree. This will make any vegetation you draw appear more natural. This is one of the key points to keep in mind while drawing leaves. Another important point is that when you're drawing a leaf, it bends towards the ground. The line should not always go through the exact center of the leaf. As you can see in the video, tilt that line towards the beginning or end of the leaf, not always in the middle. This is the correct way. I'm curving the leaves and trying to avoid drawing the center line exactly in the middle of these 3 leaves I'm about to draw. This will help define the leaf's shape. We bent the leaf toward the ground. Next to it, from the center where you drew those 3 leaves, continue with the rest. Try to keep the leaf sizes similar. It's better if the middle leaves are smaller, as they're younger and fresher. The outer leaves can be larger as you move towards the edges. You can make the leaves a bit bigger. Here's a tip about these leaves. If you want to start the center with 4 leaves, remember that the midlines shouldn't be exactly in the middle. They should be slightly off center towards one side or the other. Tilt the line right or left to enhance your design. As shown in the video, don't make the 3 lines and leaves exactly like an equilateral triangle. Instead, split it from the middle. When viewing from above, you'll see the bush directly in front. You can see it this way, but from the side, the middle line leans to one side. This makes your design look more natural and appealing. Next, for designing a tree, start with half a trunk rising from the bottom, splitting into 2 parts in the middle. Pay attention to the middle section where it separates into branches. Try to create a semicircle shape there. When drawing, never separate the branches at a sharp angle because the leaves, meaning the stems, should separate smoothly. If you follow this principle when designing a tree, whether realistic or fantasy, you can definitely create a more beautiful tree trunk and branches. Regarding the leaf shapes, we can use a rough semicircle for the upper portion to explain the form. For the lower part of the tree, where upper leaves cast shadows, you need to mark an area. When painting, these leaves should be darker. Separate this part. The tree's stems extend upwards and you'll distinguish the lower section. To work with the leaf we drew on the left, divide the leaf shape into circles or oval forms. This helps you identify where to add more leaves and shadows, aiding in structuring the tree you're drawing. Now, let's start with the sheets you saw on the left. As I said, consider each of these as a bush you want to fill with leaves. We'll turn it into several centers, not starting all leaves from one center. They shouldn't have a single central point. Continue with one center as long as you can, then slowly add another for your leaves. If you consider this center, the lower leaves will go downwards, while the upper leaves of the bush or tree section will go upwards. As we mentioned, try to make the upper leaves a bit more delicate and smaller. As the leaves go down, draw them larger. As you can see in this video, I'm pulling all the top leaves upward, not completely straight, but that's a key point to note. This is a general technique that you can apply to all 5 circles and ovals we've drawn. Let's fill in the tree with the leaves we drew to create a beautiful shape. As you can see in the video, I filled 2 of the sections with these leaves. For the third and bottom parts, we'll do the same. We'll consider one section as the center of the tree. We start drawing leaves around that center, then gradually move outwards. As we reach the edges, the circles of leaves will overlap. Try to layer the leaves, placing some under others for a nicer design. This approach will make your tree look more appealing and natural. Remember, the leaves around the outer edge of the tree form the canopy. You should draw all of these pointing upwards as shown in the picture. Don't draw them pointing downwards. Start by drawing each leaf individually pointing upwards. Keep in mind that the leaves should have some spacing between them. Don't draw the leaves too densely packed or right next to each other. We don't do that at all. Instead, try to arrange the leaves in a reduce the amount of their expanse. Work one by one between them. It should not be too full. And you're trying to take the outline of the leaves that you're trying to let it be a little bit up and down, that is like a circle. They don't come all at all. Fill in some blank places, fill some places, and so on until you can cover the entire surface of the tree. So the next thing you need to pay attention to is the leaves. That bottom part means the part that is the sheet. They are shading them above and we are going to kill them. Be aware that these are no longer needed. As I'm drawing with a pencil, I need a center. They do not have these leaves in line with the upper leaves. As if they are behind you come and pull these leaves down one by one. None of these breaks are positioned upwards because of gravity. It affects them and they are all placed downwards one by one, that is, almost inclined towards the foot. And then we said that you don't need a center and a middle axis. You are around to around the same line that we marked with a pencil. It comes one by one. You fill it up like this, and we come to the painting section for a series. We add color to them and show with shadows that these are the leaves on the underside. There are trees. The next thing I have to tell you about the trunk of a tree. There are 3 trunks. A tree is very simple, like a tree almost. Let me show you how to draw the first tree. Start with parallel vertical lines on both sides of the trunk. Bring these lines towards the center. Add some horizontal lines too. This creates depth, showing how light hits the tree from the front, casting shadows on the sides. Add some dots for texture. Now, for the second trunk, draw small leaves coming from both sides. Shade it with vertical lines. This makes it look like a maple tree. For a cypress-like tree, add parallel lines to show the trunk shape. This is the simplest way to design a tree trunk. You can also add tiny dots or lines inside to define the trunk's form. For the third model, it's almost like a plane tree. For a plane tree, notice how bark peels off in patches. Draw irregular shapes to represent this. Shade these areas with horizontal or vertical lines. Add more lines and shapes as seen in the video to make your tree trunk look more natural. The last point I want to make is about a branch separated from a tree trunk. Let's focus on that branch now. Imagine this red line I've drawn as the tree trunk. A branch has grown out from it. We never draw it straight like this. Instead, to make your work look more natural, we'll curve it slightly and separate it from the trunk. I've drawn a series of spiral curves. Try to incorporate this throughout your work as if the tree trunk is twisted. Never draw 2 straight lines. We only do that for trees like pines with smooth, straight trunks. For other trees and leaves, always add some curvature to your work. Imagine the trunk has a twist, like when you fold a ribbon. You'll see lines and curves forming. Keep this in mind as you draw, just as I've shown with my pencil. Now let's add leaves to this branch. Leaves never grow directly from the main trunk. You should draw small stems and smaller branches for the leaves to grow from. Separate the stem from this branch. Keep in mind it won't come off straight. There's always a slight curve, creating a small bump. This is the stem and branch we're talking about that separates from the tree. Now we want to add leaves one by one. As we can see, when we reach the end of the stem, we don't leave it straight, we give it a slight twist. As it reaches the end, it gets thinner. For the tip, I want to add a leaf. I won't draw it straight. As we said, gravity affects it, making it tilt downward. To make this tree branch look more natural, we'll add another branch and stem from the back, which we can't see. We'll add leaves the same way I explained before. Let's try to bring the center line closer to the sides and add leaves one by one. Sometimes these leaves might detach from the branch, but not like we're seeing now. As I'm drawing in the video, try to connect them to smaller branches. Mark areas with a pencil to plan what you want to do, then add these leaves one by one. Let's set it up. It's better to draw your leaves first. These leaves cover part of the branch, about 10 leaves per section. They're placed along the branch. For a cleaner design, sketch with pencil first. Then, when outlining the branch, use a pen or any tool you prefer. Remember, the leaves should be visible on the branch. As they hang down, gravity affects their shape. Study real leaves to see how they're not all identical. Add some curves to make them look natural. As you can see, this leaf I drew fits perfectly on the branch. So it's best to sketch the trunk and branches first, then add leaves. Once done, outline with a pen or marker. Make sure to draw leaves realistically, both in front of and behind the tree. This will make your drawing look more natural. That's an important tip I wanted to share. As for the tree trunk, its twists guide us on how to draw the trunk and branches. We start with parallel lines in curved areas, making the design more natural and appealing. As you can see, these twists in leaves and stem make our work easier. It shows how to draw the lines, which helps when coloring. Notice how this stem differs from the branch we drew earlier. The more attention to detail, the better it looks. That's it for today's lesson. See you in the next video. Take care.